at today's Rules Advisory Committee, or the RAC, to provide feedback and advice for the development of the draft rule of the Drug Manufacturer's Annual Fee Assessment. Also in attendance with me is Karen Winkle. She's the Division Rules Coordinator who will be recording today's discussion. And Sophie Para is the Program Coordinator for the Drug Price Transparency Program. And Breck Burke, who is the Data Analyst for the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. We also have other PDAB members affiliate, but Sophie and Breck are going to help with most of the conversation today. So today for the meeting is Thursday, March 7th, 2024, and the time is approximately 11:04 Pacific Standard Time, and this RAC is being conducted through a Microsoft Teams program. I'd like to begin the RAC with introductions of our Rules Advisory Committee members. So I'm going to switch over. So these are advisory committee. If you can please turn on your camera to introduce yourself by stating your name and affiliation, I'd appreciate it. I guess if you can introduce yourself based off of the committee roster, I'd appreciate it.
I'm Amanda Meeker. I'm a pharmacist with the Oregon State Pharmacy Association.
Thank you, Amanda.
Good morning, Brett Michelin with the Association for Accessible Medicines. AAM represents generic and biosimilar manufacturers.
Hey everybody, Charlie Fisher, Director at OSPERG, we're a statewide public interest group.
Hi, Darian LaGrue, Director of State Policy for Pharma, representing the companies.
Thanks, Daria. Is Jennifer on? All right. Regina? Not on yet. Okay. Lynetta?
Hi, my name is Lynetta Moore. I'm with IntegraChain. We are in support of manufacturers for the state transparency across all states.
Wonderful. Sonia? Thought I saw she was on. All right. I guess we'll still be missing those three members, but I think for the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward. Thank you all for your time and participating in today's RAC and for introducing yourselves. Just a quick note before we get started, that written comments for the RAC will be accepted until 5 p.m. Next Friday, so March 15th. Comments and exhibits will not be accepted after this time, date and time. So please send your comments to Karen Winkle, and you can reach her at dfr.rules@dcbs.oregon.gov. So again, any written comments regarding feedback from today's conversation, we greatly appreciate it if you can send it to Karen by next Friday.
Yeah. Sorry, can I ask a question about that? You guys also did share the NPRM and statement of fiscal need and fiscal impact that had the same deadline, March 15th. Does that mean that you don't plan to have a second RAC after this one to follow up? Is this one and done, or?
Yeah, that's the intention, is to have the one. Well, I want to see how the conversation goes today with some of this stuff, but I think for the most part that it is this should be the main RAC committee. I'm going to jump over to show the rule real quick. Start right there. But before we jump into the rule review, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background. So again, the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, or PDAB, was enacted as part of Senate Bill 844 in 2021 and is housed within the Department of Consumer and Business Services, or DCBS, with the purpose to protect consumers and other entities from high cost of prescription drugs. Then in 2023, Senate Bill 192 amended the ORS 646A.695 and requires DCBS to adopt by rule annual fees to be paid by manufacturers for prescription drugs that are sold in Oregon. The fees will be calculated to cover the expenses incurred by the Division of Financial Regulation, or DFR, for running the Drug Price Transparency Program, also known as DPT, and PDAB. And these are governed under Oregon Revised Statutes 646A, 680 through 646A.697. Give me just a second, Brett, and then I'll call on you. Thanks. So the intention of this rule is to establish the collection requirements and process for reporting manufacturers that report to DPT as defined under OAR 836-200-0505 to pay annual fees to the Department of Consumer and Business Services to meet the cost of administering those ORS 646A.680 through 646A.697. So, Brett, yeah, take your question now.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate you guys taking the time. I know you've done a lot of work on this, and I've just got a couple of basic kind of, I don't know, level setting type questions. I'm wondering if you can answer for me. First of all, I'm just wondering if we can kind of figure out the universe of what we're talking about here, what the 2023 budget was, or 2024, 2025 ongoing, if we know the number that we're talking about. And then also just kind of the number of manufacturers that have paid this or average cost. I just kind of want to understand, you know, are we talking about $100 a manufacturer? Are we talking 2,500? Yeah, you know, I know it depends on which category they fall in under this rule, but I would just like a basic understanding of what it was before. And I apologize if that's available somewhere and I just don't have it.
Yeah, so it is not readily available, just in the sense we're still doing quite a few of the assessments, but kind of based on our assessment, we have a total of maybe 500 manufacturers. And again, it depends on where you are within your portfolio for NDCs that you will be governed either into a small, medium, or large category. And then from there, you'll be provided the assessment fee. But I think we'll have more time to discuss that. Let me open it up first to the stuff, and then hopefully as we start the discussion, we can answer more of those questions clearly.
Do we know what the PDAB cost last year or what they're allocated this year?
I don't have those numbers. I'm assuming Shelley may, if she can disclose that. But again, there's some stuff that I'm not sure if we are required to tell. I just know that we have a basic assessment fee.
Brett, this is Ralph Magrish. Sorry to interrupt, Courtney. I manage both programs. I'm going to ask for just a little bit of patience and allow Courtney to facilitate through the rule. I think some of this will have more meaning and context, and then we can pivot, I think, to potentially share some conceptual models of attribution. So I would just ask for you to sit tight for just a little bit and see what teases out through this discussion, and then we can circle back. If that works for you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just trying to understand the numbers we're talking about.
Sure.
The broad numbers.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. So again, I'd like to open the meeting now to the RAC members, and we can continue the conversation, Brett, to provide the feedback for the annual fee assessment draft rule. I would like to ask you to please raise your virtual hand, and then I will call on you just to maintain some consistency through this process. So this showing on screen is the draft rule. And again, I already discussed kind of the sections under our components under section 1. And again, the purpose of this section is under the director to determine the amount of revenue needed by considering expenditures in the administration of the 646A.689 through 646A.97 and any additional cash reserves. So then going on to 3, just real quick, each reporting manufacturer shall be assigned to one of 3 categories based on the number of NDC codes, packaging codes, identified under the FDA approved prescription drugs in the manufacturer's portfolio during the annual billing year. And Sophie will provide a little more context on that in just a moment. I just want to get through this section first. The annual billing period is the calendar year prior to the year the annual fee is imposed. And the department shall determine the number of NDCs for a manufacturer by referencing the FDA National Drug Code Directory to calculate the number of unique NDCs for the manufacturers and known labeler the manufacturer uses. And again, this is where those manufacturers will be assigned into 3 categories: large indicating 40 or more NDCs, medium will be 11 to 39 NDCs in your portfolio, and small is 10 or fewer NDCs. I just want to take a moment to pause on this one because I know it's kind of a lot to digest, and see if the committee has any questions or like some clarifications on this component right now. Daria.
Thanks. Yes. So specifically about the NDCs, we would request more clarity in how you're going to be identifying those NDCs. There's 2 potential pitfalls. One, there are NDCs that are no longer used sometimes, but they're still in the directory, or there are different directories, and sometimes they're not all updated at the same time. So we would wonder how you would filter out unused NDCs. And another example of where there may be a data problem is sometimes sample packs are assigned their own NDC. So, those are not sold products. There's no revenue associated with those products. So that could inflate a manufacturer's numbers. So we would like more information on what data you'd be using, and what sort of filtering you do or data transparency is available on that.
And Toby, is this something that you can address on this, or Brack, since you did the analysis?
I'll try giving a little bit of information, and then maybe Brett can fill in on what he has available to him. There are limitations in what we can quantify on the NDCs, first on some of the concerns that Daria brought up. The main thing we use is the FDA's NDC directory. They have an NDC directory that they keep, I think, quite up to date. And that's the directory that we will be using. We determine, we look at our active manufacturers, we look at the known labeler names for those, and then we will take the number of NDCs that we have, and we do make sure that they are approved NDCs, so unapproved products are not considered, and over-the-counter products are, those are also on the NDC directory, and we eliminate those as well. So those are the ones that we are able to filter out.
Correct. Do you have anything else to clarify for?
Nothing else to clarify, no.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, follow-up question to that. While just on the NDCs, can you discuss the rationale or just why you came up with the 3 buckets you did?
Yeah, I can discuss that a little bit. Basically, one of the things that we looked at was the way that the FDA determines fee sizes for the generic drug fees. And so we kind of looked at that, and we saw that although they were looking at drug applications, not NDCs, package NDCs like we are, they have a small, medium, and large size. And so we looked at that to evaluate what we thought would be appropriate based on the dynamic that we saw in the FDA's using for their small, medium, and large. And so basically, we doubled the numbers that they had for that. We're looking at brand and generic and those types of things, but we use that similar rationale.
Thank you.
Determining buckets.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, Brett.
Somewhat along the same lines, I'm concerned that just using the NDC database is somewhat, I mean, the burden on you guys alone, I think, is significant. Plus, we believe that it's really an inappropriate measure of how to charge manufacturers for these programs. The burden of it first is there's over 207,000 NDCs. Only about 38,000 of them have even sold product or have been used to sell product in the last 5 years. Now, the law as I read it, and that was actually one of my questions too, is that the fees are to be based on drugs sold into Oregon. Now, I don't know if that's, and this is a question, but is that based on what the manufacturer sells into Oregon, or is that it being interpreted as just if that drug from that manufacturer is sold into Oregon? Because in the generic, and the reason I'm asking that is the generic marketplace, my folks don't typically sell to anybody but wholesalers, and the wholesalers determine who is selling or where product is moving to. And so to use just the NDC database, pulling through that information to determine which manufacturer's drugs were actually sold in the state is going to be extremely burdensome. Then move to why we think it's somewhat inappropriate is your generic manufacturers typically and will often have thousands of NDCs of products that they're not even manufacturing at the time. Just because they happen to have an NDC or an NDC can indicate, you know, whether it's being used for a single patient or there's an NDC, you know, that 1,000 pills in a bottle being sold to a pharmacy that the pharmacy then breaks up. I mean, you're allocating fees on I think on data that you're not going to be able to appropriately apportion to who is actually doing business in Oregon. And so, I mean, just why that this is being used, I mean, primarily to fund the PDAB, where generics and biosimilars, almost none of the PDABs across the country, including Oregon's, have identified any generic or biosimilar drugs that are of concern. But yet, because generic manufacturers, just because they have higher numbers of NDCs, are often going to be categorized into the larger bucket. It just doesn't seem like that's a very equitable solution, especially coming from where we were before, which was the legislature determining that it should be based on revenue derived. And now I totally get why you guys wanted to change that and the complications involved with that. But it seems like you're going full sail the other way, and more of the burden being placed on generics that are not causing the affordability issues that the PDAB is looking into.
Thank you, Brett, for that feedback. I really appreciate it. I'm actually going to turn over to Breck to see if there's any process in the methodology that can be clarified for Brett regarding the level of impact of identifying the NDCs.
Hey, Brett, thanks so much for
Hi.
that feedback. I think I think it's great to hear from you. I guess I would just say, you know, a couple of things. We evaluate quite a few different options, and we kind of measure those options on, you know, a spectrum of equitability being one of the kind of criteria that we looked at. And this was, you know, what we determined to be the best option, given sort of the data that we have available to us. And so this is what we determined to kind of go with. But I will say, you know, hearing your feedback loud and clear, and you know, we will, you know, to the best of our abilities, take into consideration.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and just to stress, I mean, the thing that I think is going to be the most complicated for you just using these is determining which manufacturers are actually sold into the state, because that's not in the NDC database at all. You're going to have to go elsewhere to find that, and that's why, you know, it just seems like, and if you want me to provide other options, I mean, we've kind of thought that through too, but I don't know if this is the spot in the meeting to suggest that, but.
I see Lynette's hand up. Let's go to her real quick and see if we can add some more clarity to that.
Well, I just wanted to echo the comments there, because I can appreciate the standpoint that we're coming from, but if we're looking at just the FDA database and we're looking at the NDCs there, is there any input or any resolution that the state would entertain from a manufacturer that if they dispute the number of NDCs, because they could be in the process of discontinuing it, a product could be in the process of obsoleting, because it does take time for those things to happen. They may not have any sales on those products any longer. And this particularly happens, as the gentleman there is speaking of, in the generic world. So is there any dispute mechanism for the manufacturers?
Thanks for the question, Lynette. At this time, we do not have a dispute process in the sense where the one is to utilize the FDA and categorize those based off of the drugs that are sold in Oregon. So we felt pretty confident that we were able to identify the manufacturers into the correct categories for the correct fee assessment.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to echo the request that there be an option to appeal. This is not the same as the prior fee. That's a flat fee for every manufacturer. And since it is based on a calculation where, you know, as we've seen with the PDAB, there's a lot of opportunities for the data to go sideways. And we just need to be able to, manufacturers need to be able to give feedback or the option to appeal if there is an error in the data at some point.
I just want to state real quick that if somebody is a company is placed on the wrong bucket, yes, I mean we can correct those issues in the billing if need be. So.
Yeah, I think it does take some communication between the manufacturers and DCBS to determine where those corrections would need to be made. Yes, Charlie.
Hi, thanks. And I'll probably betray my ignorance about this particular area in my comment, but I mean, it sounds like from what I'm hearing, a lot of the manufacturers likely have thousands of NDCs, and you know maybe some of them are not ones that would fall into this bucket. But given that the largest category starts at 40, I don't know. It seems to me that maybe it probably wouldn't be as big of a concern get it being in the wrong bucket, given that if there's 5,000 and then even hundreds within that aren't applicable, they still would be in the large category. I don't know. It seems like there are obviously choices that have to be made, but feel good about this being the one that probably is the right path forward.
Thank you, Charlie, for your feedback. So if we'll continue to work through the sizing categories, but again, from what we've analyzed, this is one of the easier approaches. I mean, I understand, Brett, what you're saying, that it seems probably challenging, but due to the variations of other strategies that we've come up with, this was the best suited process. So, but hopefully within this conversation, we'll be able to finite some of that information going forward. But I want to come over to this section 4 real quick, where it kind of also includes where the appropriation of the fee is included or associated with the category size. So this states that the end of the annual billing period, each manufacturer's annual fees will be calculated based on its size category. So from 3, the amount of total revenue needed apportionated to its size category, and the number of reporting manufacturers in its size category. And this is determined by a manufacturers classified as a large shall collectively be apportioned 70% of the total revenue need. Manufacturers classified as a medium shall collectively be apportioned 25% of the total revenue need, and then the manufacturers classified as a small shall collectively be apportioned 5% of the total revenue need. The kind of example provided in the rule is that the total revenue needed for a year, for example, the millionth, then there are 100 manufacturer categorized as large. Each of those manufacturers would pay a $7,000 fee. So Daria, yeah, hi.
Hi. Could you speak to the rationale to the buckets, the 75 or the 70, 25, 5, where those numbers came from?
Yeah, Brock, I'm gonna have to turn that over to you for that rationalization.
I think Sylvia has a good explanation.
What's that? Oh,
Yeah, for this 70,
yeah, I
was
think
determined.
when we looked at the different models, it was just a matter of trying to make it equitable. So for example, you know, we have 500 and approximately, you know, half of them are going to be small. They're going to be covering a portion of our fees because, you know, that are in that category, and then about a quarter of them are medium and a quarter are large, and then that would just be something that seems more equitable considering the amount of revenue that most of the larger companies would be making versus medium and small.
Yeah, give me just a second and I'll throw up a diagram that I put over. Are you able to see that Word document categories? Kind of provide a
Kind of gives you,
breakdown.
it's just a rough
Yeah.
example.
Again, hypothetical, nobody actually belongs in these yet, but just as an example of understanding. So say if we had 500 manufacturers, and these were manufacturers identified into their categories, then this would be the expenses that would need to be covered for each of those categories and the estimated amount per manufacturer to cover those costs.
Is this, I know you said it's a just an example, but you did say at the beginning that early estimates are 500 manufacturers. Is this the breakdown that you, in your early estimates, not holding you to your feet to the fire here, but is that 50, 25, 25 breakout what you're seeing so far?
Yeah, this is we're kind of close in the number. We have between 500 and 600 manufacturers, but that is where we're seeing a lot of them fall. Is kind of close to those proportions. So this isn't an exact example, but you know, this was just something that's kind of close to what we're seeing in some of our initial calculations, but we still have some information to iron out and then some things to figure out.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the amounts are going to be that we have to cover our program expenses. We're required to. So we don't know what that amount is going to be.
Thanks, Sophie. Appreciate that clarification. Was there any other questions for section 4? Feedback? No.
I would just reiterate my question of that 50, 25, 25. How are you actually determining whether that manufacturer's drugs were sold into the state?
I'm not
Because
aware
quite
of the
honestly,
requirement
I don't know how to answer
that
that.
they have to be sold in
So
the
I
state.
don't know how you guys are.
Brett, this is Ralph. There is no statutory provision that requires us to be building that calculus based on number of drugs that sold in the state. To the point that you acknowledged earlier, in the original enabling legislation in Senate Bill 844, it did require us to attribute that fee based on the manufacturer's share of gross revenue of sales in the state. As discussed, really, there was no way to identify that as a valid data source for both drugs dispensed in community retail pharmacies and in the hospital setting. Thus, the new requirement that came out of Senate Bill 192, and that is that it does leave it to the agency to determine and develop rules as it sees appropriate. Thus, we are here with you today to solicit your input, and we appreciate everything you're offering. So continue to ask for that.
Ralph,
Sure.
But the law does say, quote, paid by manufacturers of prescription drugs that are sold into the state. That, I mean, that was a very recognized portion of that legislation when it was going through. This is based on what is sold into the state. And quite frankly,
Right.
there's the staff, you yourself, you guys are doing an immense amount of work on the PDAB. that is helping determine drugs and the costs and, I mean, the whole gamut
So
of what is
two-
being sold into the
two-
state.
Sure.
And I don't think you can just flat ignore the law.
I would suggest to you, and we do have counsel here as well, I would suggest it's our interpretation that language was struck from statute under Senate Bill 192, leaving it to the department to adopt rules as necessary for carrying out the provisions of that statute.
Yeah, I'd love to get a legal interpretation, and I will greatly apologize if I'm wrong, but I pulled up 646A.695 out of current statute yesterday. And that's what I just read from.
Appreciate that. We will take a look at that
Yep.
as well.
No,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Sure. And Courtney?
Yes, thanks, Brett. So moving on real quick to sections 5 and 6, again, the revenue collected under this rule will be deposited into a prescription drug affordability account, and those would be established under regulations of ORS 705.146. And then just lastly, a manufacturer shall pay its annual fees imposed under this section no later than 30 days after the date of assessment by the department. A manufacturer shall pay interest at 9% per annum of any assessments that is not paid when due. Yeah, Daria.
Courtney, if I can real quick, and Brett, important, I want to acknowledge that I do believe I spoke in error and I am looking at what you are seeing. So to that point though, and this is part of the conversation here, if you all have a better mousetrap, if you will, or methodology to propose, is acknowledged that there is no meaningful data source to identify what drugs are sold in the state specifically. This is our best alternative approach, again, in a methodology that we believe to be most equitable. So this is why you all are here today, candidly, to offer us ideas, input, comments, and feedback. So all of that we welcome. And again, on the record, I apologize for having misspoken.
Go ahead, Daria.
Thanks. Regarding the last thing, the 30 days, we would like that to be a little bit longer, given that this is a change from the existing drug price transparency flat fee, where a manufacturer, I could be wrong, but I think that they pay it when they submit their data each year or when they register or something like that. So like they know that they're doing that. In this case, the department will need to be sending an invoice to manufacturers. There could be hiccups there. There could be a desire to appeal in some cases. You know, there's a pretty big step off between medium and large manufacturers. So if somebody was on the line, you know, they may want to appeal their number. So our manufacturers have said that 60 to 90 days would be a more reasonable time frame, given that this is not the same as the previous drug price transparency flat fee.
Okay, we can look into that. I know, Sophie, do you have any input on what that regulation is? I thought that says pretty.
Yeah, our accounting staff are the ones who have outlined the procedure for us, is that you issue a demand to pay 30 days before the due date. And that is how we've been directed to operate. The program is that if we give something information prior to that, we still have to issue that demand to pay and things. And so I'm not sure when we'll have calculations or additional information that might be available. We'll see what we can do to at least let people know what bucket they're in and that type of thing prior to the demand going out.
Thanks, Sophie. We appreciate the clarification. Was there anything else, Brett, Daria? Yes, Daria.
Yes. So I wanted to go back to generally big picture speaking here. First off, what is the interplay with the existing program? SB 192 pulled the drug price transparency and PDAB funding into one statute and rewrote that a little bit. What was not stated was whether the existing $400 fee goes away. Does this supplant that? Or yes or no? Sorry, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, the prior fees exist for prior years. So that rule will stay in place for those, for back billings. And it is not part of anything to do with this. This replaces that for future billings.
This will replace that for future billings. Got
Yes.
it. Okay, thank you. And then the other part was, which Brett started to get into in the beginning, but I think that we'd really like some clarity on the total budget for both programs. You know, for the last year at least. I mean, the DPT program has been in existence. We'd like to know the budget there, plus the addition of the new work of the PDAB, you know, recognizing that's the first year. We think that it's fair to have a universe to kind of know where we're starting from at least. And then in the rule, we would request transparency in what the director deems necessary, because it is, you know, at the whatever the director deems necessary, but we think that there should be annual transparency for manufacturers so that they can plan for it, you know, project what it would be in 3 years.
And if I can interrupt for a quick sec, Courtney, because we've been working, we do have Shelley Greiner, our budget analyst for the division, with us, and I think she's in a position, hopefully, Courtney, if you're able to give her screen, we can provide you and the information, a 70,000 foot view of actuals that Brett had requested right at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not great at sharing, so I will do my best. My cat just decided to come and talk to me. Okay, can you see a spreadsheet currently? Did I do it correctly? Okay, so just to give you a high level, what I have in the green, the program expenses for both programs for DPT, drug price transparency, are listed in one column, and then the PDAB is listed right next to that. So you'll see the totals for last biennium, which is July 23 through 21, pardon me, through June 30 of 23, totaling what for both programs just over 2 million. I will note that PDAB was phased in last biennium, so those costs did not start till March and ramped up slowly. We also had some vacancy savings, you know, not recruiting positions as quickly as we had hoped. So that's kind of why we're kind of hesitant to, you know, to rely on what has been spent so far. I also included the actuals from July of 23 through January. And so that just shows you. So personal services are the salaries, OPE. So you can see that's really the largest part of the budget. Service and supplies are going to include any DOJ costs. I think we have license agreements with some, like Metaspan as an example. The program honestly doesn't pay a whole lot of S&S. They were absorbed in DFR, so you know they don't have to pay necessarily costs to be a standalone. So that did save some money per se. The chargeback that you see, that's just internal. The ITNR is our information technology, and they're working to modify our current platform, which is we call IREG. And that's what we have been using for the DPT billings. They're modifying it to accommodate billing for PDAB going forward for both programs as combined. I will note that we don't have all the costs for them yet, so that's also an unknown. They're working on that right now, the project plan and the charter. So we will see additional costs in that category. A couple other, you know, impact as far as for personal services. There was a COLA in December. There will be another COLA in December 24. So, you know, we're going to do our best to project that out and be as accurate as possible going forward. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea thus far.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. Appreciate you jumping on and sharing screen.
Of course.
Yeah,
I have one last comment, and we will put all this in writing as well. But the Maryland PDAB is a fee-funded PDAB, and they have language in their regs to address surplus. If there is surplus over a certain amount, it is to be returned to manufacturers. So we would suggest that Oregon mirror that from the Maryland PDAB.
Just to let you know how we've handled some of that in the past is that if we have billed for DPT and then the amounts for the next year, you determine, okay, how much do you still need to cover, so the excess gets rolled into the future fees. So we'll more than likely be doing a similar
Okay.
thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie, for explaining that. All right. Was there any other feedback on the rule before I transition to the next topic? Okay, thank you, Daria.
Hey,
Brett.
Courtney, can I offer one other piece of this conversation? I think it's probably follow-up and relevant, responsive to some of the questions that perhaps Brett was asking, and that was about who's a reporting manufacturer, and that by definition, and Sophie, please feel free to pick up on this, but for those reporting manufacturers who by definition sell drugs in the state, the way I believe we identify that are those manufacturers who, excuse me, are in fact registered with the Board of Pharmacy to sell or have their products distributed in the state. So that is where the source of attribution begins for this model. But Sophie, would you want to offer anything else beyond that?
Yeah, I can just say that, we have the three-pronged for in order to even be registered with us. And so that's one of the reasons that is what we use, is the people who are registered with us. Those are the ones that we expect to have the fee. They have the three prongs is that they are licensed or required to be licensed with the Oregon Board of Pharmacy. They are a drug manufacturer, by definition, and their products available for sale, where they are setting the price for those products that are available for sale in Oregon.
Thanks, Sophie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph, for jumping on and clarifying that. Appreciate it. All right, Brett, was that able to kind of answer some of your questions before we move on from the rule?
Well, I think that identifies the manufacturer. It doesn't identify the manufacturer's drugs that are sold into the state. Just because they sell, like I started earlier, they could have multiple drugs, and the wholesaler is the one who determines whether or not a particular manufacturer's drug is sold into the state. Not just the fact that they have the ability because they're registered to sell into the state. So I just think there's going to be more questions on that, but I don't want to bog us down on legal terms.
Amanda, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I think the way that the statute is written, that it's not based on the number of drugs that are sold into the state. It's if there's any drugs that are sold into the state, or it's you have to pay the fee. So, I mean, there could be a manufacturer that has a drug that's not sold into Oregon, and that probably is a special case, but I don't know how many of those there are.
And I see Lynetta, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point that Amanda just brought up, because as the industry has become more complex, you have very specialized products that potentially are not sold in any state. I'm thinking of some of the gene therapies and things of that nature, and it's very patient specific. So you're going to still be categorized to be, to pay a fee here, but your product may never be utilized in the state. Some of these specialty products are a very good example of that.
Just to let folks know too, we have had some manufacturers contact us that they sell products specifically to like a hospital system in an East Coast state and things like that. And we tell them they're not required to register. And they're also generally not required to be licensed with the Oregon Board of Pharmacy either. So they are generally not even part of our program. We have been contacted by some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, thank you all for your contribution and feedback. We'll take everything that's been said and see how we can address some of that in the draft rule before we finalize it up. But I do want to take a moment to go over the SNFI. So a draft notice of proposed rulemaking statement of need, or the SNFI, was provided. And the evaluation of the annual fee assessment rules suggested that there is limited or no fiscal or economic impact on small businesses in Oregon. But is there any further discussion from RAC members on the SNFI? And I'm going to go ahead and share that so we can go over it. But welcome any feedback or insight of this draft before we move it forward. And did everybody get a chance to read over the attachment that was sent out with the material? Okay, thank you. So I'm not gonna read everything through it, but I just wanted to provide the opportunity for the committee to provide any feedback or insight if they felt that there was some sort of impact on small businesses in Oregon. Otherwise, I will move on to public comment. Yeah, Charlie.
Well, I don't know if this is within the scope of what you're trying to accomplish here, but you know, I would just say I think the whole point of the program is to bring down costs for consumers of prescription drugs. So if anything, making sure that the PDAB and prescription drug transparency program are funded and effective would have a positive impact on consumers and small businesses in hopefully bringing down cost of prescription drugs for them and to the state as well.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Appreciate that. Any other conversation? All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing and provide the opportunity to open the meeting up to public comment. So anybody on that is not a RAC member can participate in a public comment session. I just ask that you please raise your hand and I will call on you to provide oral comments and request that comments be at 3 minutes, please. Anybody? No? Well, I guess not having any public comment options, I just want to thank the RAC members. Daria, your insight's always very meaningful and I appreciate it. And Brett, really appreciate the conversation and bringing things forward for us to review. And Charlie, for your support and advocations for the work that we do. Thank you for the rest of the committee members that participated. I just wanted to give a quick reminder again about written testimony. Really appreciate when things are submitted in writing. So if you could please make sure that Karen receives those by next Friday evening at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And I think at this time, we're not going to call any an additional RAC. I know that there was, I think, a calendared one for the end of March, but I think that we've got enough feedback that we can incorporate what we need moving forward for this rule. If that is subject to change due to any of the written comment, we will send out a notice of an invite at that time. But again, so much appreciation to the RAC members of your contribution to this, and I will call the RAC to close at 11:52 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate the work.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you all. Bye.